The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're gonna love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, man. If you had told me 6 months ago I would have the opportunity to interview somebody involved in January 6th, I would have been like, I don't even know if I want to do that. But dude, I want to do that with you because you are, man, you've lived like 9 lives in the past 4 years. So let me set this up a little bit. All right, everybody. So today I've got Paul Davis on, and Paul's somebody that he's another guy I discovered on Instagram because honestly, I've just resonated with your content. And Paul's one of those guys, I mean, similar to J Slay USA, you know, our boy Jeremy, and these guys are friends actually. And what's cool is Paul's another guy that I've just been consuming your content. And every time I listen to something, I'm like, dude, this guy just makes sense. It's just common sense. And again, similar to J Slay USA. By the way, I like calling Jeremy J Slay.
He's great. Jeremy is.
Yeah. But
he's a good
similar to
friend.
J Slay USA, I think guys like him and guys like you are what is needed right now because you are white, everyday Joe Americana, and you are people that, again, have been on the Trump team. You had supported him. And with you, we're going to take this all the way back to 2020 with January 6th, because this is nuts. But similar to me and similar to Jay Slay, you've kind of been like, wait a minute, this isn't what I was supporting, or this isn't what I voted for, if you ended up voting for him this time, which I don't think you did. But that to me is what is needed right now. We need people that have supported him to kind of be like, wait a minute, this isn't what we supported, and this isn't the guy we supported. So anyway, with that as a slight intro, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem.
I think this will be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Before we get into 2020, give us a little bit of growing up for you, because again, you also kind of grew up a Christian. Am I correct?
Yeah, I still am a Christian. I have a lot of different views than I used to. I've just kind of woken up to some things through this journey that we're about to discuss over the past 4 years, which you're right in saying I feel like I have lived 9 lives in the last 4 years. So, but yeah, growing up, I mean, I'm born and raised in Dallas, Texas, grew up in a evangelical Christian with an evangelical Christian background, grew up conservative, voting Republican, all the things. My dad's a pretty prominent architect in Dallas, and my mom was a school teacher. I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do with my life, so I did what all smart people who can't really figure out what to do, went to law school.
Yeah.
There's a little more to it than that, but I actually wanted to be a JAG for the military. I thought that would be a really cool job. I used to love the show JAG, so that was kind of one thing that led me to go to law school. And I ended up going to Marine Corps Officer Candidate School, and I very quickly figured out that I'm way too free-spirited for the military. I could actually feel kind of nothing against anybody that served in the military, because I have utmost respect to military people, but for me, I just kind of felt like it was a groupthink type atmosphere, and I'm very resistant to that sort of thing. If you actually read like my Myers-Briggs profile, it will actually say, do not join this personality type should not join the military because you're too much of a free thinker. You're too independent.
That's funny. That's funny. You know, I think a lot of those guys that went into the military, I've had several on, and I think you'll know some of them. I've had Josephine Gilbo on. I've had Alan Shapiro on.
Great.
You know, these guys, you know, went into the military, and like Alan said, he's like, dude, I was drinking the Kool-Aid by the gallon. But, you know, after seeing what I saw and after seeing what I was a part of, whether that was in Iraq and Afghanistan or like in Gaza right now, they're like, I can't believe I was a part of this. And quite frankly, man, that PTSD hits hard for those guys. It really does hit hard for those guys. Okay. So growing up, I mean, would you have considered yourself, and by the way, I am no expert on organized religion, so if I say something wrong, please don't get offended, but absolutely correct me. Would you have considered yourself like Christian Zionism?
Yes. I wasn't familiar with that term. I don't even think I really knew the term Zionist till a few years ago. But I definitely was at that mindset. I believed that Israel was modern Israel, God's chosen people. And when Jesus returns, he's going to return to Israel, and Israel is key to the end times. This is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and they have to take back the Holy Land from the Muslims and rebuild the temple. And then Jesus is going to return. And that's what we're all taught growing up. I thought they were God's chosen people.
Wow. That really is what a significant amount of Americans who fall under Christianity and maybe even Catholicism. And I'll be honest, man, whenever I ask people, I'm like, what's the difference between being a Christian and being a Catholic? 9 times out of 10, people don't even know that answer. I don't know if you do, but I think it's amazing that so many Americans were just like you in terms of kind of having that almost ingrained in their youth, basically. And so I think now what is happening with what's taking place in Gaza has caused an entire generation of people that grew up just like you, who are willing to think for themselves now, to kind of question that. Are you seeing that?
Absolutely. People are waking up everywhere. I mean, you could never, I have seen it change really fast since October 7th. It's taken a bit, but it's happened faster than I would have thought, because this is so deeply ingrained. And I think before October 7th, even within, I don't know, a few months after October 7th, you could not mention at church, evangelical churches, that you're against Israel. You would be completely you would face a look of shock on the person's face, and they would think you weren't even a Christian. I've been told I'm not a Christian because I oppose Israel, that I don't believe in the Bible. And that is really what you're taught. I would honestly go as far to say that in many evangelical circles, if not most, you almost feel like because you meet a lot of people in evangelical Christianity that basically practice Judaism. Like, they have Shabbat dinners. I've been invited to Shabbat. I've attended a Shabbat dinner before, and doing rituals like that is looked upon as almost like a higher form of Christianity. Like, you've really arrived when you've mastered the Torah and all of these practices. Like, a lot of people think that way, so it is very deeply ingrained.
Okay. And so let me ask you this, because I think you are such a perfect example to help people understand this. October 7th happens, October 20th, as the months go on, did you start to be like, wait a minute. Wow, they just bombed another hospital. Wow, they just took out another school. Wow, there's another maimed child I'm watching on the TV. So like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, and again, I'm saying all this because I've followed your Instagram. You remind me of Candace Owens. You remind me of Tucker Carlson. Like, it wasn't like on October 8th, you guys felt this way. It's been over the course of the past 16 months of basically watching this genocide play out on your phone, is when you, as somebody that previously completely drank the Kool-Aid and completely supported everything, is that when you started to like have a little bit of a change?
It actually happened a little faster for me. And I think a lot of that was because I would say I was one of the first people I saw on Instagram actually calling Israel out. The only other people I could remember, I think only one other person, and that was Harrison Smith on InfoWars. And he's not even on Instagram. I was watching his show, and he was saying a few things that made me think, and also Owen Schroyer. So I got to credit those two guys. I'm not, unfortunately, a huge fan of Instagram of InfoWars these days.
Yeah.
Alex Jones, I think, is really disappointed me in a lot of ways, but that's a whole nother story. But having a podcast, I take it upon myself to do deep levels of research, and I try my best to know what I'm talking about when I'm commenting on current events. I mean, my show is about taking what's happening now and relating it to how does this fit into the globalist New World Order agenda, this agenda to basically establish a one world government and enslave all of humanity under one communist government. And so I try to look at current events and think about how does this fit in? How does the narrative about this event fit into this plan? And so when October 7th happened, I think I was out of town. I think I was traveling. I can't even remember really what I was doing, but I had something going on that weekend, and I saw the news updates, and I was just like, oh wow, okay, this is a big event. I need to figure out what this is about. And I've kind of come to the point where I don't really form an opinion until I look at all sides of it. And I mean, obviously I had my preconceived Israel good, Palestine bad. But by this point in my life, after everything I'd seen from January 6th and just everything I've gone through, I'm wizened up to the fact that things aren't always what they seem to be. So I was able to kind of put aside my preconceived beliefs, and I thought to myself, I really know nothing about Israel and Palestine. I have not studied this conflict. I know what I've been told in church, but other than that, I really don't know. And I remember I used to listen to, shame to say now, I used to listen to a ton of Ben Shapiro. So I knew a few things he had said about it, but I never really, it was something that happened over there, and I never really thought too much about it. So I think one of the first things I remember seeing was Owen Schroyer on InfoWars to his credit, had a guy named Frank Boyle on. He was if I'm getting his name correctly, hopefully I am. He was the lawyer actually for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Is that what it was called? The PLO.
Yeah, the PLO. Yeah,
the PLO. And I want to make sure I get my acronyms right. Under Yasser Arafat and all of that. And he was helping them try to establish statehood. Owen had this guy on, and I'm watching, an InfoWars broadcast, and this guy's talking about how Hamas is a liberation force who's unfairly demonized as a terrorist force. I'm like, what? I was like, whoa, that's kind of a big statement. So I was like, I want to read this guy's book and figure out why he's saying this, why he has this perspective. Because all I know is that Palestinians are a bunch of terrorists, and they're, a bunch of radical Muslims hell-bent on killing all Jews. That's their goal. You hear that Hamas charter, we're going to kill every Jew and all that's over the top stuff. So I read his book almost immediately, and it was really interesting to see kind of how he had advocated for Palestinians and their statehood, and kind of he goes through all these different historical events and how they've been persecuted and all this stuff. And then that led me to, I read his book. Then I listened to, I'd say the biggest impact that if anybody's looking for probably what I would say is the best resource to just completely understand as best as you can the Israel-Palestine conflict. I listened to it's a podcast it's called the Martyr Made podcast by, what's the guy's name? Daryl Cooper. He was actually on.
Yeah. The Martyr Made, Daryl Cooper. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, that thing is legit.
Oh my gosh. His series it's a 6-part series called Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. This guy did an interview on Tucker Carlson about this podcast, and he read over 100 books. He read pretty much every book there was on the conflict that he could find. He read thousands of papers, and I can tell you can tell when you listen to it, it is a extremely balanced analysis or presentation of just the straight up history of the conflict. He actually is very sympathetic to the Zionists. He says a lot of actually good things about them. I think he's actually too generous to them. And then he just goes through the history of it. And you cannot look at the history of this conflict, and he tells you like what historical documents you can go look at. Like one of the key ones for me was the United States and the British did a commission report. They sent commissions to investigate the very first Palestinian riots. I don't even know if they were called Palestinians back then, but the Arabs living in the land at that time had a few riots that were horrific. I mean, they did terrible things to the Jews. There's no question about that. So they sent commissions to investigate what happened here, and the commissions found, and I looked at these reports, that the Palestinians did do horrible, unthinkable things to these Jews, but what provoked this? And it was the fact that the Zionists came in and kicked these people off their land, basically made them live in shanty towns in the streets, and they made them completely destitute. And these people were desperate and they were angry, and no one ever, and the Jews had done horrible things to them as well.
Yeah.
It's, everybody in America seems, for the most part, at least before October 7th, and I was one of these people, you're only told half the story. So you look at it, as soon as Hamas attacks or there's some, suicide bombing or something like that, you're just told, oh, these people are a bunch of terrorists and they just hate the Jews because they hate them because it's their religion, because they're a bunch of extremists. Nobody ever looks into, well, why are they really doing this? You know?
Right.
And so that had
Absolutely.
hearing the other side of the story as to what actually motivated these people to, how did they get in such a desperate situation that caused them to act in such violence to throw off this colonization, this oppression. I mean, that really opened my eyes.
And by the way, this report that you're talking about that the United States and England, I guess, did, is this something that goes back to like 1917 Balfour Declaration or 1948 Nakba or 1967 Six-Day War? What time frame are we talking?
This was the Nebi Musa riots, I think, when they did that was the very first big Palestinian uprising.
Okay.
And there was a few of them. I think one was Nebi Musa. Another one was, it's been a while since I've listened to it, so I'm going to forget some of the names. But there was one that happened in Jerusalem. There was another that happened in another city. And they were, I mean, it was horrific. It was like a lot of bloodshed.
This is probably the
violence.
intifadas. This is probably one of the intifadas, like the big uprisings. Okay, you know what? I'll go back and research it. I need to listen to that Martyr made, that 6-part series. And actually, I need to go back and listen to his interview on Tucker Carlson as well, because I'm sure that was pretty legit. So I'll do that. You know what's funny? We really didn't even intend to talk about this topic, but I'm glad we had a little info on that. All right, dude, let's get into January 6th. Let's get into J6, because I don't know. Are you considered a J6er?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that went to January 6th is a J6er.
Okay.
I didn't spend time in prison, thank God, or in the gulag. But yeah, I would consider myself a J6er. I think most people that went there would consider themselves J6ers.
All right. And by the way, before you get into this, I do want to say this, because I don't want anyone to leave this interview right now if they're like, oh, he's a J6er, I don't want to listen to the rest of this. So the reason I have Paul on today is because, like we said at the beginning of this podcast, my man has lived 9 lives in the past 4 years, and he's really, I don't even want to say come full circle, but his views have changed so much. And for those of you that listen to this podcast, which is everyone listening right now, you know where I stand on Trump. You know how I've said he's a different dude. This is a changed guy. You guys heard everything that Jay Slay USA talked about in his interview about how he's a changed guy and how the assassination is what changed him. So Paul is cut from our cloth, okay? But the difference is, and the reason I'm so excited to have you on, is because, again, he did go to Washington, to the Capitol on January 6th of 2020. Tell us about that. Like, how did you even decide to go, get invited, I think I know how you found out, because Trump said, let's go down there, but let's be peaceful. But talk us through all of that.
Sure. Yeah. And I do want to return before the end to the Israel issue, because this was a big part of my journey. I think we'll go through it chronologically, because I think the interesting thing for your audience is just to see how somebody that was so just dyed in the wool, conservative, Christian, evangelical type person. I don't even consider myself part of the right-left paradigm right now. I do consider myself still a Christian, but I wouldn't say I'm in the mainstream of Christianity. I believe the basic things. I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and that I'm saved through faith, grace and by faith. But, I've come a long way. So you're about to get the journey here. So yes, going to January 6th, I was a huge Trump supporter, and that was because I saw Trump as a populist. I felt like he was somebody that was outside of the political establishment. He wasn't controlled. He was the first president in my lifetime that had not taken us to war, that had actually ended some of these wars and gotten us out of conflicts and avoided any major conflict. And so knowing what I at least knew a little bit by that time about the military industrial complex and just a lot of the interests involved there, not in as much depth as I know now, but that told me, hey, this guy kept us out of war. That separates him from a lot of these other presidents that we've had in my lifetime. I mean, all of them. And so when leading up to the 2020 election, I had stopped listening. I was a big Ben Shapiro fan. I grew up on Rush Limbaugh. Okay. So I loved Rush Limbaugh. I felt like, I used to listen to him every day, and his health started declining, and I was like, man, I got to find somebody else because one of these days he's gonna die, and I'm not gonna have anybody. I'm gonna have this void in my life. Who am I gonna get my political stuff from? So I found Ben Shapiro, which I'm just ashamed that I ever listened to Ben Shapiro now, but
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I get that. Although I will say, if you discovered Ben Shapiro even during COVID, you probably were like, oh, this dude's dead on. Because again, the entire Republican Party, in my opinion, was spot on during COVID. To me, COVID was my awakening. COVID was absolutely my awakening. I thought it was the first time where I was like, all right, dude, this stuff does not add up. Something's going on. And it caused me to really pay attention. And so, I don't know when you discovered Ben Shapiro, but I will say I remember listening to Ben Shapiro during COVID, and I was like, wow, this guy gets it. And I agree with his takes on COVID, along with, quite frankly, every other person in the Republican Party. And then that just completely disappeared once October 7th happened. I disagree with everybody in the Republican Party except Thomas Massie and maybe Rand Paul. Those are like the only two guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will say some things Ben Shapiro said during the pandemic started to kind of clue me into he might not be who he appears to be, because he did encourage mask wearing. I do specifically remember that. And I actually bought into it for a little bit. I mean, I was at my girlfriend and I were wearing masks. And then I started to think, I was like, this doesn't even make any sense. Like I looked at some other stuff. So that was one thing. And then after I had stopped listening to him, when I stopped listening to Ben Shapiro was leading up to the 2020 election, after it happened. And I started to see I still do believe there were some massive problems with that election. I think it's, at the very least, the outcome was uncertain. I do think Trump actually did win that election. And I think that's part of the psychological operation now. I think that whole thing was actually to victimize Trump more. I was actually about to make a post about this earlier. Trump supporters have been so conditioned into hero worship of Trump because of all the victimization he's gone through. And I would say that includes what happened to him in the 2020 election. So I did truly believe that the election was stolen. I was watching a lot of Steve Bannon at that time. I couldn't believe that Ben Shapiro, he didn't question the election at all. That was kind of the last straw for me, because I was like, dude, how can you not, with all these millions of mail-in ballots? I mean, just on its face, to me, it's like, this is the first time in our country's history that almost half of the country voted by mail, which is an inherently insecure method of voting. I mean, say what you want about it, you have to admit, when you vote by mail, you are signing a ballot, and the ballot, the judge, the election official is not there to watch you do that. So that just on its own inherently leaves uncertainty and insecurity. And that was actually what I don't know, there was some bipartisan commission, I forget, it was the Carter, I can't remember, but it was a congressional commission that did a report and concluded that mail-in voting is bad. It's there's a reason most other countries don't do it. So just to me, disregarding everything else, just the fact that half of America voted by mail, and then you're watching these talking heads on the news say, this is the most secure election in American history. It's like, that can't possibly be true. That can't possibly be true,
No, it absolutely can't. And I don't know, I've talked about this a lot, but I don't know if you've watched the documentary Bernie's Blackout. Vice TV put it out, and it's excellent. And it shows how Bernie Sanders was absolutely dominating the Democratic ticket in 2020. And until he wasn't, and the media started to block him out and basically took everybody else, got them out, and then made Biden the guy. And then that's when they initiated COVID for that. I agree with you 100%. And, if for anybody that doesn't agree, again, I've said this before. I said, hey, you just have to come to a conclusion of, is it plausible that there could have been, tomfoolery during the 2020 election? And it absolutely is plausible. It absolutely is. And you're right. Mail-in voting, it's not a safe way to vote. It just isn't. There's no certification of who's actually doing that. So then you had like hundreds of thousands of ballots being dumped at 2 a.m. into certain, mailbox receptacles. That just doesn't make sense. And the whole concept of COVID around that made no sense. I talk a lot about, I would go to a restaurant in Los Angeles, and I would stand up and I'd have to put my mask on. But then when I sat down at the same table, I could take my mask off. I mean, that's just absurd when you talk about it now. And for anybody that cannot accept how absurd that is, or the plausibility of it being absurd, they're just lost causes. They're just lost causes. But all right, go on.
Yeah.
Oh my
So,
gosh,
I had questions. Let's just say I at least
There you
had
go.
some questions that I wanted answered, and I felt like Trump was being treated unfairly. And it wasn't really so much about Trump. It was about, I wanted to be sure of the outcome of this election. And I felt that the official response was insufficient. I did not think that they were doing any kind of, I'm a lawyer and I'm looking at all of this circumstantial evidence showing me there's something very wrong here. And I don't think I can trust the results of this election. And, that's the most fundamental right as a citizen, is to know that you actually do have representative government. So this wasn't for me. Yes, I was a very strong supporter of Trump, but this was more about the institution of voting and having a free and fair election that you can trust. And so I actually went to Washington, D.C. on December 12th. They had a Stop the Steal rally there. And I just met a lot of like-minded people. I had a blast. It was really the first big political event I'd ever been to, made a lot of friends, just felt very inspired that so many people came out to try to support voting integrity, election integrity. And then, so when Trump announced the January 6th rally, I just thought I was going for more of the same. I was going to go hear some speeches, maybe march around the Supreme Court and pray with other people, and march around the Capitol and pray with other people. And that's really what I thought I was going for.
Wait, really quick. You had said January 12th. Now we're at 6. Did you mean?
Did I say January? December.
Yeah, December 12th. Okay, got it. Okay, so you went to something on December 12th. Yeah. You were like, "Oh, this is cool. We're just in search of the truth." Got it. And then January 6th. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So I went back and I actually ended up going by myself. I knew like one other person that was going. And so I went and heard the speeches, and it was really cold. I think the temperature dropped substantially throughout the morning, and so I was so cold. I was getting hypothermia. My teeth were chattering, and I couldn't go to the Capitol. I had to walk all the way back to my hotel room and thaw out. And I wasn't even really watching the news or anything. And so as soon as I kind of thawed out, put on a heavier coat, I went back out to the Capitol, probably sometime mid-afternoon. I don't know the exact time. And it was pandemonium down there. I'm walking up and I'm just seeing there were cop cars everywhere. It looked like I remember specifically, it looked like some people were blocking a cop car from getting. I was like, this is weird. Like, what is going on? And because I hadn't heard I wasn't listening to any news. And I'm just a really curious person. So I just walk as far up as I could walk. There were no barriers. I remember afterwards seeing video of they had these barriers. And I saw some scattered, bike racks here and there, but it wasn't clear. There was no clear perimeter. Let's just put it that way. And so I just kind of kept walking up. And then I saw all these people sitting in the scaffolding, for the inauguration, like a football stadium. So I was just like, all right, well, I'll just sit here and just chant with everybody. I'm at a protest, so that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to yell and put up signs and stuff, So I did that for a while, and then I was trying to find my friend. I finally found him, and he was between the scaffolding, kind of in this area just between those two sides. And that was the first time I saw the Capitol Police. And it was pretty intimidating. Just a line of policemen, I think 3 or 4 deep, and they're all wearing the riot gear that you saw. But nobody, I found my friend. He was just like, hey, man, he's like, I'm just here, talking with the police and some videos, telling people what's going on. And so I was just like, all right, cool. I'll just hang out. And so, I was just standing there, and most everybody else was around me. It was just standing there, just yelling stuff and taking videos. And
was it at this point? Was it violent? Was it mayhem? Was it breaking stuff, or it was just kind of people milling around?
Just people milling around. It was I remember hearing that there was like, I remember hearing of like, I think I heard about, I don't remember at what point in the afternoon I heard about the Ashley Babbitt thing. Somebody was like, oh, somebody in the Capitol got shot. And I was like, what? That's crazy. You know, like, and, but I didn't personally around me see any violence until just standing there, just doing my thing, just protesting with my voice. All of a sudden I felt this, it was weird. I felt this like tense moment. I can't really describe it. It just felt like something was about to happen. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. And all these, you know, gas grenades exploded around me, tear gas, and then flashbangs. You know, I don't know how close they were, but they felt pretty close. Like I felt like there were some flashbangs that blew up within feet of my head. You know, it was like, it felt, yeah, I don't know how close they were, but it seemed like they were pretty close. And it was just shocking, and I couldn't breathe, and I was tearing up, you know, because they call it tear gas for a reason. And so I just ran down the steps and got out of that. And, you know, I pulled out my phone and made a video because I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I was just standing here, you know, I talked about, I was just standing here exercising my First Amendment right, and I get hit with tear gas and flashbangs. And it was really at that point that people started to get rowdy, at least around me. You know, I can't speak for other parts of the Capitol, but where I was, people were not being rowdy until that happened. And so I would say, and I've seen some documentaries that kind of document this phenomenon. One was the Epoch Times, The Real Story of January 6th by the Epoch Times. I would say it was pretty accurate from what I remember, because they had a police brutality expert. This is a guy that testifies in police brutality trials all over the country. And he was analyzing the crowd control methods. And his conclusion was, looking at all of this, what they were doing was not conducive to controlling a crowd. This was crowd abuse. Because if you were trying, I'm trying to remember some examples, but it's
were
just
they
like,
inciting the crowd?
That's what I would say, and that's what I observed. Because again, around me, just from my personal observation, I wouldn't say anybody around me that I can remember was intentionally being violent. There were maybe like a handful of people that maybe got into a little like push shove thing with a few, but it wasn't anything major, you know? And then, but after they fired on us, basically, that's what got people riled up. And then the line of Capitol Police pressed forward, and they started, I remember seeing them throw some elderly people downstairs. And that's what really pissed off. Like, when you see something like that, like, you're just like, you watch a cop brutalize someone who's elderly, you're just like, that's wrong. And I remember a lot of people would be shouting like, how dare you? Why are you doing that? So, you know, that's what really started to get people riled up, I would say.
Wow. Okay. So this is all happening at the Capitol, and then people started. Did they storm into the Capitol? Because you said you didn't go inside. I'm so glad you didn't. By the way,
thank God. I didn't even know people were going inside. I was on the other. Because thank God, you know, the where they opened the doors, that was on the other side of the Capitol. So I was on the side, like, I forget directionally which side that is, but the side facing the Washington Monument. And so where they opened the doors and everybody flooded in, that was on the other side where the Supreme Court was. And so nobody that around me got through nobody got through a police line or anything like that. This perimeter just expanded. But basically, I mean, I kind of stood back after that initial, you know, confrontation, because it just was, I just couldn't believe what I was watching. You know, it was surreal. And I hung out for a little bit longer. I don't really know how much longer, but then I finally just thought, you know, it's not really any reason for me to be here any longer. You know, I mean, I
think the lawyer in you subconsciously kicked in, and you're like, okay, this is not a scene I need to be around. All right. What about that video? You said you filmed the video, because I think that video kind of ended up causing some, well, I don't think it caused any legal issues for you, but I know it caused some personal issues for you, right? Like, did you go live on Instagram, or what did you do?
No, you couldn't really, there were so many people there, so you couldn't get a signal. I mean, I could barely even text my friend. I mean, it was like a miracle we even found each other. I couldn't get anything to go through. But at some point, I think it was right after I got tear gas. I remember taking a video then. And then I took a video, and I just was talking about how, you know, you know, this is unjust. Like we are here, you know, what did I say? Just protesting what happened in this election, and the fact that they won't do a proper investigation should tell you something. And I did say, it's kind of funny because I was thinking I really did actually want to, and I knew it was kind of symbolic because I knew they weren't going to like let me into the Capitol, but I remember demanding, I was like, I want to talk to my senator, I want to talk to my congressman, you know. I mean, I really did. I really did want to talk to them because I wanted to give them a piece of my mind. And as to, you know, what are you doing to investigate this election? What are you doing to solve this problem? Are you just gonna, you know, go along with this? And so I did say, I said, you know, we're all here trying to get into the Capitol to stop this. But what I meant was, I was like, we're asking to, you know, I want to talk to my senator, my congressman, because nobody around me was trying to, that I could tell, break in. So that video, well, I got back to my hotel and was just kind of, you know, decompressing from all of that. And then I got a text from, well, first, and I had no idea how this was being portrayed in the media. I got a call from I was engaged at the time, and my fiance was just like hysterical. She was like furious and just like, I don't understand why you all are up there at the Capitol and what you're trying to accomplish and all this stuff. I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? She's like, I saw that guy with the horns and like all the people going into the Capitol and all. I was like, what? What? You know? So I was just like asking, like, what are you seeing on the news? Because I had no idea.
Your fiance seeing it on the TV, you're not seeing any of that because you're there in your own little, you know, subsection. Let me ask you this, like, were you and your fiance pretty aligned politically? Like, was this surprising because she was on the same page with you with what took place in the election?
She was very not interested in politics.
Okay.
Which was that was kind of, yeah.
That's beautiful. All right, you know, you pretty much just summed up 99% of my friend network. Pretty not interested. Okay.
Yeah, she did not like talking about politics. That was a big struggle in our relationship because I'm very outspoken about politics and just current events, and you know, she's more like wanted to watch The Bachelorette and you know, she's really into fashion and things like that. She's a very cool person. I mean,
totally,
you know, she had a lot of talent. Yeah, but
trust me, I totally get it.
Yeah, but not the type of person that. Yeah. So not the type of person that's going to like stand with you if you're leading a revolution, you know, which I was not trying to do, but that's what, you know, that's what she was seeing on the news. So I was pretty shocked by that. Cause I mean, the things she was saying, like the way she was attacking me, I was like, whoa, you know, I felt like I was being attacked by somebody on the other side of the political spectrum, you know, and I really, you know, it shook me. And I started to think, wow, I don't know if this is the right person for me. I honestly thought that, like, it was such a bad argument and she attacked me so hard that I was pretty taken aback. So I was kind of reevaluating things. Yeah.
Okay. We don't have to we can get into it as little or as much as you want, but was that honestly the beginning of, because I know you're not married to her, so was that the beginning of, I guess, the end of your relationship?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, because I just thought I'm very strong in my views and just the way, I don't remember all the specifics that she said to me that night, but I just remember the feeling that I had, which was, this is not someone I remember thinking this is someone that has a different worldview than I do. And I wasn't aware of that really until that moment. And so I was kind of reeling from that. And then I was just reeling from the trauma of the day. Just like, I mean, it's just highly traumatic to be in a situation where the police that you think are there to, you know, protect your rights are actually abusing you, you know, and that's really how I felt. Then I got a text that changed my life. My one of my best friends, or I would say my best friend, texted me and he said, "Hey man, somebody sent me this," and it was a screenshot of the tweet that changed my life. And it was this guy, Roger Sollenberger. He was a journalist for Salon.com. Now he's with the Daily Beast, and you know, far left journalist. And he said he had ripped up my Instagram story. It was like I looked at the post and it was a video, and he had basically kind of spliced together the video I made right after the getting tear gassed. So it made it look like I was doing something wrong because I had been tear gassed, because, you know, no law-abiding citizen ever gets tear gassed, right? And so, you know, and it said this, and it kind of showed some of my footage. I had taken some footage of like after I got tear gassed and stood back and was kind of observing, you know, just the clash between people and the police. He posted that in the same video. And then, you know, the part where I was like talking about why I was there and how we're all trying to get in the Capitol to
So
stop this.
he clipped your Instagram stories and he created a narrative that he wanted to portray of, and correct me if I'm wrong, here is some crazy MAGA Trumper Texas lawyer. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
And he published that. He tweeted that?
Oh, I can tell you the exact text of the tweet. So he said, "This is Paul Davis. Paul is an attorney. He is he's in-house counsel and HR and the director of HR director at Goosehead Insurance. Or I shouldn't really say the company, but
oh my God,
he's the director of this company.
Blast. He put your wow, it's like he doxed
I actually
you.
can. I can say this part. I have a settlement agreement with Goosehead, but I can talk about this. I can talk about the tweet that caused me to be fired, basically. So he said, you know, this is Paul Davis. Paul is an attorney. He's in-house counsel and human resources director at Goosehead Insurance. And today he stormed the Capitol to stage a coup against the government and posted it or undocumented it on Instagram. And then he tagged my employer, tagged Goosehead. And
my God.
So by the time I saw that tweet, which I think it had only been up for like an hour, it had 500,000 views just in an hour. And I was like, as soon as I saw that screenshot of the post, you know, of his tweet with as many people as seen it, I immediately knew my life would never be the same. Because you hear about these Twitter mobs and you know, I'm like, oh wow, this is a Twitter mob. This is one of those things you hear about. And I knew immediately that I was going to get fired. I really did. Because I kind of knew that my company just was not really, you know, they didn't want me being very politically vocal. And I just kind of knew that was going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And I honestly don't really blame them. I mean, you know, stock price was going down. And so basically the next morning I wake up and I got fired first thing. So that was pretty traumatic. I mean, because that was actually a job that I loved. And I had worked really hard in a law firm environment, a brutal law firm environment for 10 years to get an in-house job like that. And I absolutely loved that job. So that was a pretty devastating impact.
Like, were you not able to help I mean, I do understand the employer side of it. Like, I really do. But were you not able to help them understand that, hey, this guy clipped these various things. Here is it in entirety. They probably just didn't, especially if it's a publicly traded company, they probably were just like, you know, we can't have this.
Yeah. I mean, I can't get into any of the specifics of that. All I can really say is that, you know, the tweet came out and they fired me as a result. You know, and it's, you know, I really don't hold any animosity towards them. I mean, I feel like I understand, you know, if I was in their shoes, maybe I would have done the same thing. So.
Okay.
But
fair enough.
It was very traumatic for me. And I didn't end up suing them because their CEO came out and said that they fired me because and this is all public. This is in the public record. He said on several, I think it was the first one I saw was a Fox News article, and then like several others repeated it. But he said that they had fired me because they don't condone violence or you know, violent or illegal activities. And I was just like, I didn't do anything violent. I didn't do anything illegal. I mean, you know, and I actually, you know, a federal judge, I still don't know who this person is, even though I tried to get a public record. I tried to have it made public, which was my right, but they didn't comply. Some federal judge tried to have me disbarred in one of the federal districts I was admitted to. And, you know, I had to do a whole defense on why everything I did was legal because, you know, I researched all the trespassing laws and stuff. And I'm like, even be guilty of trespassing, I would have had to cross a clearly marked boundary. And there were no clearly marked boundaries. And I pointed out, like, look, if the police wanted us to leave, they could have easily gotten on a loudspeaker and said, please clear the area, disperse and all this stuff. But that never happened while I was there. And so I was just standing there. I went up all the way up to a boundary. The first boundary I saw was the line of police, and I didn't cross that boundary. So, you know, I didn't do anything illegal.
Wow, man. What an ordeal. Okay, so you lost your job. Sounds like you lost your fiancée from that, or you guys decided to go separate ways. What about in your family and your friend network?
Yeah, it was like, I always say, you know, if you've read the book of Job, my life turned into the book of Job pretty fast. I mean, 2020 was definitely the best year of my life. I mean, I got out of the big law firm environment. I got this great job with Goosehead, and I got engaged to just someone I really did love.
So you had just gotten that job. You had just gotten engaged. Holy mackerel.
Yeah. So everything, and I had this, like, I bought my first house in 2020. I was leading this Bible study at my house. So that, I had all these great friends, all these couples that we hung out with. And then within 2 weeks, I was fired. I was too scared to live at my house because it I didn't know there were all these, like, just all the repercussions. I remember actually the next day when I woke up, that was one of the worst days of my life, because I woke up and I got fired first thing. That was shocking. That was traumatic. And then I started hearing the FBI was like rounding people up and they were going to charge all of us with sedition. And I was just like, what? Well, I've never broken the law other than like a speeding ticket in my life. And now all of a sudden I'm in fear of being charged with sedition, which is a pretty serious
sedition?
crime.
I don't even know what sedition is.
I'm laughing because I had a whole lawsuit about sedition and the defamation lawsuit. One of the points I made in the lawsuit was most Americans do not know what sedition means. And, it's basically, inciting, it's trying to
chaos, like inciting chaos against your country or your government.
It's basically trying to overthrow the government. Yeah. Taking an active step to try to overthrow the government. I could pull up the exact legal definition, but it's something like that. And I'm like, overthrow the government. It's like, we were there trying to demand an investigation into the election to make sure the election was legit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know anybody that was trying to overthrow the government, like it's so stupid, because it's like, okay, let's just assume that, all these people went in there and like, captured the Capitol building, which is highly improbable because nobody was armed. And, maybe I think a few people might have been armed, but by and large, nobody had guns, nobody had weapons, so what's the end game here? You're going to occupy the Capitol with unarmed people. And then what,
Yeah.
So I was always like, how is that an insurrection?
No, I think, listen, that whole thing, I think there's so much more to that, as is the case with everything. I mean, when Tucker Carlson came out with the January 6th tapes, I mean, you watch what Tucker showed, and it looks like a completely different day than what CNN and MSNBC showed on January 6th. So obviously, and I'm sure the truth is somewhere in between, and probably leaning more towards people that were just like a little bit clueless, a little bit excited, a little bit like, hey, all we want is we want to be heard. We want, election transparency. We want to understand because we think the election, maybe was tainted with, but then that day got spun up, man. It got spun up, and again, spun in the media in a different direction, which obviously it sounds like that's what your fiance looked at and used to kind of, man, dude, that's a lot. That's a lot. So your 2020 was amazing, but yeah, you're right. Cause January 2021, we're talking about, that was the day of all of this stuff. So man, you really unraveled in 2021. Not that unraveled, but all this stuff.
I kind of did. I mean, January 5th, I was just the happiest person alive. I mean, I was so excited to get married. I felt like my life was just coming together. Yeah. And then, 2 weeks later we broke up, and really, I mean, long story short, it was basically like, I think that, part of the reason, it was like, she felt like I had ruined my career, and that I didn't really have a future. And I mean, I can't really blame her for thinking that. But for me, the things that she was expressing, like I remember specifically the moment I really knew it was over is she looked me in the eye and she was like, well, you believe what you believe just as strongly as Black Lives Matter believes what they believe. So why are you right? Wrong? And I was like, what? I was like, I mean, you're talking about moral relativism. I was like, it's not about how strongly you believe something. I was like, I personally believe in the objective truth, that I learned from the Bible. Not to say I believe every single story in the Bible is like literally happened, but just like the moral principles of it, and which is another thing I'll get to, because many Christians do believe literally everything in the Bible happened the way it said. Anyway, and I did at the time, actually, I come to think of it. So, but we parted ways, and that was really hard. That crushed me. And then I found out she actually started dating somebody else 2 weeks later, and that was really hard. So that was a very big emotional blow. And then like I think that because I was the one actually to end the relationship, then it was like she kind of played the victim with our friends, and it just, our friend group disintegrated, you know. So I pretty much lost my friends. And I didn't have, you know, I couldn't get another job. I mean, it's like I had to apply to a bunch of jobs for unemployment purposes. But you know, every interview I got, they were just like, yeah, we looked you up, and yeah, you know, because yeah, so it's just like
because your stuff was everywhere.
Oh god,
everywhere.
There were so many. It's like crazy how many news articles there were. I mean, just the fact, like, you sent me one that you had found that I hadn't even seen. Like, I don't even think I've seen like half the news articles about me. There's so many.
I will say, everybody, I tried to do my research before this, and man, as soon as I put Paul Davis, Texas lawyer, I mean, it was insane. And I read half of them, and yeah, I sent Paul one. I said, hey, I found this one. I just want to, you know, I'm trying to do my prep work prior to our podcast. Is this a pretty good summation? And I loved it. You're like, wow, I've never even seen this.
Yeah, it was basically some summary of the Business Insider did a big piece that got a lot of circulation about me, kind of the aftermath, just how it affected me. I mean, they hit the nail on the head. I really reached a point where I felt like I didn't want to live anymore. I mean, I just could not see a path forward. I mean, it was like all at the same time. It's like I lost this job. I lost, you know, I had to sell my house. I mean, I lost everything that meant anything to me at that time. And I just didn't see a path forward. I was like, where do I even go from here? I can't get another job in my profession. And the one thing that kept me going was this guy I met through another lawyer who was working with him. They were working on an election lawsuit. So I actually participated. I was the lawyer on this 2020 election lawsuit. And as a matter of fact, I was one of the first 8 attorneys. There was this project called the 65 Project. I think it actually still exists. And their stated goal, this was funded by the Media Matters guy. I forget his name, but he's a big, you know, Clinton.
Yeah. I know that guy.
His name, but David Brock, I think it's his name.
Okay.
And so he and some other people started this organization to try to disbar any attorney that had filed an election lawsuit. And I was one of the first 8 people on the list. I was actually kind of flattered because it was like all these big name people I'd heard of, like Jenna Ellis and like Boris Epstein and John Eastman. There was like, and Paul Davis. So I was like, wow.
That's hilarious. So your name is on the list. That's like a badge of honor. I remember that Jenna Ellis gal, and then like there was some other lady, Sydney something.
Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell was on that list of the first 8 people too. I was like, I knew there's somebody else. Yeah,
dude, you're like big names. You're like, I've made it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a mixed feeling because, you know, I was on this list and I felt pretty flattered that they thought I was important enough to make this list. But, you know, I was not looking forward to having to respond to a frivolous bar complaint. Fortunately, Texas, they submitted this like long complaint against me as to why I should be punished or disbarred. And like, it was all BS. And I actually spent 2 weeks going through each point, responding to each point. And then I never heard, like, the bar just dismissed it. Like, so like I never
something like that. As a lawyer, when you get it, is that just cumbersome, the response process and all of that? Is that something that is exceptionally stressful for you, or not really, because you know the law as well, so it's more just cumbersome for you to reply? Whereas, God forbid that never happens to me, but a non-lawyer would probably be freaking out, because then you have to hire a lawyer to represent you for all that. So it probably becomes a much more stressful ordeal, right?
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, Texas is you know, hopefully it remains this way, but the Texas bar is actually pretty great when it comes to bar complaints. They dismiss the vast majority of them because I think it seems like I've talked to them a few times. Like, they have an ethics hotline for lawyers to call. So I've called and asked various questions, and usually they'll tell you, they're like, look, don't worry. We dismiss the vast majority of these because we understand that people try to attack lawyers through their license, you know? So, you know, they tend to err pretty heavily on the side of attorneys, I would say. But it is, you know, if it is very stressful. Fortunately, I've only ever had to respond to one bar complaint, even though I would say, I bet you anything, I would be willing to bet I'm probably the most grievance attorney in Texas over the past 4 years. Like when you file something against somebody, it's called a grievance. Cause I had like, I think it was like 80 complaints come in over the January 6th thing, probably more. And then just random leftists will try to file stuff against me. I actually recently, well, this is pretty horrific. I discovered after I got back on my feet and like actually started a successful law firm, I had a con artist infiltrate my law firm and gain my confidence as my key employee, and she was running this like horrible scheme behind my back. And once I exposed it and reported her to the authorities, then she started to get people to file bar complaints against me. And like,
Oh my
it's just,
God.
it's awful, dude. That's a whole other can of worms. But
All right. We're going to have to do another podcast on that. All right.
we'll stick to the, gotta keep moving forward.
All right. I told you guys this guy's lived 9 lives. Okay. Let's get to life 9, because here's what's hilarious. I literally thought the whole podcast was going to be talking about what we're about to talk about.
Right.
But man, I actually, honestly, first of all, I really appreciate you sharing the personal side of things as well. And I'll be honest, I don't think I've had any other guest kind of open up personally about your fiance and your friends and all that. So I really do appreciate that. And honestly, I learned something that, maybe I need to bring a little more element of the personal to it, because I think it makes people that much more relatable. Like, this isn't just an interview. This is actually hearing somebody's life story. So thank you very much for that. I genuinely appreciate
thanks
it.
for listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much an open book. So,
all right. So now let's get to, here's a guy, Paul Davis, who up until now, everybody listening is probably like, okay, pro-Trump guy, da, 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 da. And now here we are, 2025. Tell me when for you things have changed, or when things changed, when the wheels maybe started coming off the bus. And again, by the way, feel comfortable to talk about anything, because everybody knows I've talked about this a lot. Like Jay Slay USA and I talked about this. Like, it's a different guy to me. It's a different person. And I don't know, man. I've committed to my audience that when I get to the point where I regret my vote, I will absolutely own that. So why don't you tell us where you're at with things, what you're seeing, and really that cracking in the base of MAGA, what you're seeing and what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So it was kind of, it was a bit of a journey to get to the conclusions that I've come to, or just, I'm always evolving with my thinking. Nothing's ever really set in stone. Maybe a few core things just to do with my faith in Jesus, but which actually, before I dive into this, just briefly, it's kind of a miraculous story. So we left off with my whole life had imploded. I really felt like I didn't want to go on. I think that so I can say I honestly hit rock bottom and I didn't see a way forward. And then the only thing I could think, I was just trying to, when your life is that devastated, you're just trying to make sense of it, like, why did this happen? Like what, and it made me question my faith in God. And I actually thought, okay, maybe God has so thoroughly allowed my life to be just crushed into little pieces and I don't know how to pick it up. Maybe he wants me to do something radically different. And I had always enjoyed, like, I had done a lot of overseas mission trips, just, feeding the poor and sharing the gospel and caring for people. And I always really came alive. So I thought, maybe God destroyed my career because that's what he really wants me to do, is to go like be a missionary, serve others. So I signed up for this program. It's called Youth of the Mission. I was going to go off and get training, and I was actually supposed to go. Their training base is in Hawaii, which a nice place to go before you go to a third world country, right? But so it was the week I had to decide for sure if I was going, and I just felt this, like, I just didn't feel right about it for some reason. And I asked God I was in the gym. I'll never forget it. I was in the gym. I was like, God, I really need a sign, because obviously I'm not really that good at making decisions, and I get things wrong all the time. Can you just please give me a clear sign as to whether I'm supposed to do this? And I was supposed to ship out to Hawaii like in like a couple weeks. I look up at the TV, and on the Chiron, it was some news station, it said, "Do not come to Hawaii." And it was the governor of Hawaii announcing their COVID policies and basically discouraging people from coming to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's not a coincidence. Right as I pray that, I look up and it literally says, do not come to Hawaii. So I ended up, long story short, started my law firm. That's what I felt like God wanted me to do. I really didn't want to. That was about the last thing I wanted to do. And I'm an employment lawyer. Okay. That's my specialty. As soon as I started my law firm, it was maybe within a week or two at the most, Biden gets on and announces the vaccine mandates. And all of a sudden, employment law is the hottest area of the law. And, I was literally the only conservative employment lawyer in the country that I had heard of. I mean, it was like, so I went from having no clients, no systems in place, nothing. And then all I had was like a phone number and an email. And all of a sudden my phone's ringing off the hook all day, every day. Like I had a business card. So I passed it out at like some meetings, some like political meetings that I would go to. And all of a sudden I was blown up and so that kept me extremely busy ever since. I went from having no way to provide for myself to just, it was like the floodgates opened, so that was pretty crazy. So then I just wanted to kind of give that background because that's kind of, so, and that dovetails into the first thing I really noticed about Trump that made me question Trump was his position on the vaccines. And I, did not trust these vaccines. That's a whole long story I don't think I need to get into, but it's just like I did not believe that these vaccines were a good thing for people to take. The first ever mRNA vaccine, what could possibly go wrong? It's like gene editing material. It gets in your anyway. But I saw Trump. I was seeing all these negative effects from the vaccine, negative things about the vaccine, but I still saw Trump promoting the vaccine. So that kind of got me. I'm like, by this time I had learned how corrupt Big Pharma is. I'd watched a lot of the Robert F. Kennedy material, the real Anthony Fauci, things like that. I had educated myself on just the revolving door between the CDC and the FDA and the Big Pharma industry. So I was like, okay, well, Trump's supposed to be this like genius level 4D chess player, why can't he see that there's something wrong with these vaccines? So that was the first thing that I was kind of like, something's a little off about that. But I gave him a pass. I was like, maybe he's just not paying attention. He's got some bad information or whatever. He's surrounded himself with the wrong people. So I gave him a pass on that. And then so leading up to the 2024 election, I was still planning to vote for Trump until maybe only a couple months before the election. And what happened was when that October 7th thing happened that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, and I started doing my research, I started learning the history of this conflict. That Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and in the New Jerusalem podcast series, that is very comprehensive. That'll give you tons to research. So I was reading all this material. I was listening to it. Then I started to research. Well, I'll never forget the day that it finally clicked in my brain. It maybe was within, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks after October 7th. I just one day I realized this is a lie. This belief that I've held my whole life that Israel is God's chosen people and they're the good guys. They're the good guys and the Palestinians are the bad guys. This is a lie. And it's actually a pretty obvious one. And it's not really even that hard to find out about. And that blew me away. I compare it to the scene in The Matrix where he takes the red pill and he sees that he's living in this fake, reality. He sees the real world and he can't handle it. Like he like throws up, he's all dizzy and he passes out. That's how I felt. Like I was like, whoa, this is like a lifelong belief I've held that is clearly not true. And then I thought, that was my first thought. How could I have been so lied to? And then my second thought was, oh my gosh, almost everybody I know believes this. So that was pretty crazy for me. Because that kind of like when you discover that some belief that you've held that strongly your whole life turns out not to be true. For me, I started to wonder, what else in my life have I taken for granted that's true? It kind of opens everything else up because you're just
that's a big one, man. That's an existential like discovery that probably makes you question everything.
Absolutely. And so I would say for people that, there's tons of people, like if you bring up highly controversial topics, like, I don't know, just the craziest ones, like flat earth, lizard people, the stuff that everybody thinks is crazy. I would say people that aren't even willing, like, if you're not willing to look into something just because it sounds crazy, I think that you probably have never had that experience where you found out that something you strongly believed turned out to be a lie. And so that really opened up a lot of things for me. So then leading up to, so I consumed a lot of material. I did a deep dive, and I don't know if Jay Slay got into this, but like I started to wonder, why do I believe, where did this theology come from that taught me that Israel is God's chosen people? So I did a deep dive on that. And I was like, this wasn't even invented until the early 1800s. Christians didn't even believe this for almost 1800 years or over 1800 years. And then all of a sudden you have this book come out, the Return of the Glorious Messiah. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but by Lacunza. And then, that feeds into John Darby, and he made this whole idea of dispensational premillennialism popular, and he had some shady roots. And then the Rothschilds get a hold of it, and they finance the printing of the Scofield Bible. And you look into C.I. Scofield, and he's a pretty corrupt guy. And then, so you follow that whole trail as to how this became a popular belief in America. And it's only based on the fact that it was promoted by a pretty powerful banking family, and the resources that they have.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you look into if you study Freemasonry and you read Albert Pike, who is one of the highest ranking Freemasons ever, wrote this letter, the Pike letter, and he describes the 3 world wars that are going to occur to establish this new world order. The last war is supposed to be between the political Zionists of Israel and the Muslim world. And it's like, we're seeing that play out right now. And so I think just learning all of that, and I mean, besides the whole Freemason conspiracy stuff, for sure, I could see this genocide happening before my eyes. You can't deny it. I mean, that you can go to tiktokgenocide.com and they have a whole library of videos depicting this. So I saw Trump getting, what did he get? Like $320 million of donations from the Israel Army.
From 325 million from AIPAC, and then 100 million separately from Miriam Adelson.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then I saw everybody in his administration that he was hiring, that he was talking about hiring leading up to the election. So I saw that $100 million Adelson donation. I thought that's not good. I see a lot of the rhetoric that Trump is putting out there, just talking about how he's the most pro-Israel president ever. And he would not condemn what Israel was doing in Gaza, which is clearly a genocide where they are blowing up women and children and starving them to death. And the fact that he would not condemn that, and the fact that he was taking money from all of these people, that led me to conclude I am not going to vote for this guy. Like I didn't like Kamala Harris. I didn't like her policies. I didn't really like her personally either. But so I sure wasn't going to vote for her. But I could not, in good conscience, vote for Trump just on that basis.
Okay, man, you actually recognized it a lot sooner than I think most people, because I think most people are just now starting to recognize, like, wait a minute, who is this guy? But you actually kind of seem to have recognized it pre-election, because you didn't end up voting for him, which, to be honest with you, I think you had told me that the other day, but I forgot. But I think that is, honestly, man, I really give you a lot of credit and respect, because look at where we've come through this podcast. I mean, look at where we've started and look at where we're at now, where you literally did not vote for him. One could say your marriage and your career and your friend and family network were just obliterated because of your support for him. And now here we are 4 years later, and you have completely changed your views because you are an evolving thinker. You're playing the cards in your hand, like you're playing the cards in your hand. And I give you a lot of credit for that. All right. What do you think? By the way, I think we need to do another episode if you're up for it, because you're an expert on this Freemasonry, New World Order and all that stuff. I haven't really talked about that because it's a lot. It's a lot, but I would love to have that conversation with you, because I'd rather you take us down the journey after I do some prep work versus me trying to do it. So if you're up for that, we'll do a separate episode on that.
I've read so much on that and watched so many documentaries, so it's kind of like I can just give you the whole plan off the top of my head at this point.
That's amazing. That's amazing. We're going to totally do that. All right, let's do this for this episode, because honestly, man, we've covered so much, which has been amazing. What do you think's going to happen? Where do you think we're at right now? Like, what do you think the rest of this year looks like? The rest of his term looks like? I mean, is this really gearing up for, I'm seeing this war between Christianity and Muslims happening. And it's almost like they're firing up the 9/11 playbook. You know, it's like maybe it's not weapons of mass destruction, but there's going to be something. I mean, I'm going to knock on wood that they don't have a false flag attempt like 9/11, like the Twin Towers, like God forbid something awful happens. They blame Iran or they blame the Muslim world. And next thing you know, we are engulfed in something. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but what do you think, man? What do you think is the playbook or the plan?
I think that's probably exactly what's going to happen, is a false flag to drag us into war with Iran. I mean, we've repeated this pattern so many times in our history, especially in the 20th century. Oh, I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah, but so that is what I see playing out. I was kind of on the fence with my decision not to vote for Trump. I mean, I did feel strongly convicted about that, but I think like a lot of people were thinking, well, he's not great on this Israel issue. This is a bad thing, but he's still right on a lot of these other issues. But I think once I made that decision, that I was not going to vote for Trump and I was not going to support this just from a moral standpoint, it really opened up more for me, because I felt like I was able to step back really for the first time from just the right-left paradigm overall. Because I think once I made that decision, I thought of myself as, now I'm really an independent. I don't really have a party. I don't really have a team. You know what I mean? I'm really, really thinking for myself at this point. And then I just started to connect a lot more dots about Trump, because I started to think, and I think I made this post on my X, which I wish I don't know. I don't think I can pull it up. It's probably too far back now, but it is in my highlights somewhere. But I basically wrote an essay on, here's all the things I'm seeing that lead me to believe that Trump is part of this new world order. And I even, actually, this is really interesting. One of the points I made was Trump, he was getting a lot of praise for pardoning the J6. And I was like, you know what? That is great that Trump pardoned the J6ers. I mean, we absolutely needed that. But let's think about this for a second. After January 6th happened, think about what we found out. Well, one thing in particular, we found out that Trump and Kash Patel had asked Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser for a Capitol, state trooper, or National Guard, sorry, name was escaping me, for a National Guard presence at the Capitol to prevent exactly what happened. And Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser denied that request, and it was their prerogative to do so. But we never found out till after the fact. I think that if Trump had come out and said, or Kash Patel and said, hey, something is going on here, because this is pretty common sense. Like, we requested a National Guard presence at the Capitol because there are a lot of people coming to stop some sort of riot from happening, and it was denied. So you might want to be careful. I never heard anything like that. And then before
you're talking 2021, we're talking the 2020. Okay, got it. Yeah.
I'm talking 2021. So nobody received any warning about that. And then we find out after Biden is leaving office that you can preemptively pardon people. I don't think most people had even heard of that concept. I looked it up. It is actually a legitimate concept in constitutional law. That begs the obvious question. Why didn't Trump preemptively pardon any of these J6ers? Why did they have to rot in this gulag in DC for 1,000 days or more? And so those two things, I'm like, yeah, that's great, Trump pardoned these people, but like, there was a lot he could have done to prevent this that he did not. And so it started, I'm wondering if this was actually part of this psychological operation that is unfolding before our eyes. And then you look at all the ways that Trump has been victimized. The lawfare, the Russiagate thing, the assassination attempt, which I personally don't believe that I don't think that the ear shooting was, I think that was staged. I have a lot of reasons I believe that. I don't have time to get into it. But regardless, the effect was that it caused evangelical Christians to, that particular event, to see Trump as God's chosen one. And you hear it over and over again. Well, God chose Trump to free this country, to spare this country, to lead this country back to God or freedom and all this stuff. And the proof is that he, survived this assassination attempt. And I'm like, what do we actually have to prove that even happened? I mean, he grabbed his ear. I didn't really see any blood till he emerged from that dog pile. And then his ear's like fine a week later. I'm like, how hard would it be to fire a gunshot and have him grab his ear? And there's just a lot. There's a lot there that I'm not.
I feel you. I feel
Yeah.
you. I definitely feel you. Wow, interesting. So let me make sure I understood something you said earlier because I think it's super interesting. So just like how Biden preemptively pardoned Fauci, his brother, his family, Adam Kinzinger, all those people that I think that was on January 20th. Like as Trump is getting sworn in, Biden's like pardoning a whole new set of people. You're saying, why didn't Trump pardon all the J6ers on January 20th of 2021? That's a great question. That's a
And
great
I'm
question.
sure that it would have been political suicide and all that stuff. It's like
Who
political
cares?
suicide.
Like
He was
political
already,
suicide.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
like,
he's on his way out.
he's on his way out. He's already like the most demonized person in America. The least he could have done is
Yeah.
make sure people aren't tortured in a gulag for 1,000 days. I mean,
Wow.
so anyway,
That is interesting. That is interesting, Paul. Oh my God. Dude, you have absolutely lived 9 lives.
I just
really,
like Candace Owens says, I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking
no, I
questions.
love it. I
Like
love
you're
it.
telling me, yeah. Go ahead.
I love it. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, what I've taken away from you is what I hope everybody has, and that you're somebody that is open to everything. You really are. You're open to everything. You're open to hearing everything, seeing everything. I mean, if somebody caught the front end of our podcast and then somebody just listened to the back end of our podcast, they would have thought they were listening to 2 different podcasts with 2 different guests. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome to me. I think that is super cool because that shows you're evolving with the new fact sets. You're taking in the new information and you're like, wait a minute. Oh man, this isn't kind of what I feel. And I really do hope that more people are like you moving forward, and especially more people that have been, let's say super Trump worship syndrome people, and even Trump derangement syndrome people. Like those people need to stop being those 2 things and come into the middle and just analyze the facts, and change their opinions with things.
Yeah, so let me try and tie it all together and actually answer your question because I just went on a long tangent. But so, that's all to say. I started to see all these patterns. And when you have, I think we should do an episode on this New World Order agenda because when you understand that, it allows you to see that the things that Trump is doing all fit into this plan, okay? So the plan is ultimately for a one world government. To accomplish that, this is
and when you say one world government, are we talking about a government that governs the United States, Russia, China, Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, everybody?
That's the plan, and that was the original purpose of the UN. There's there's a lot of different factions if you study just the different secret societies, but they all work towards one common goal, and that is to establish a one world government that it basically just enslaves humanity in a technocracy. And they have to have the technology to be able to do that. So you look at organizations, there are public facing organizations that put out their agenda to the public. They couch it in terms of, oh, this is really for everybody's good and for freedom and all this stuff.
Like the World Economic Forum.
Yes, the World Economic Forum is definitely one of those. That's probably the one most people have heard of. I mean, there's the Council on Foreign Relations. There's their equivalent in England, which is like the Royal, I can't remember the name of it.
The Bilderberg Group.
The Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome. Those are more like the ones that meet in secret. But the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, they actually put out policies. The Rockefeller Foundation, they publish their policies. Interestingly, so the plan is first to divide the world into 10 kingdoms because it's easier to control 10 kingdoms than however many countries there are now, hundreds of countries. Interestingly enough, if you look at the Club of Rome plan that was published, I think in I want to say the late 70s, I can't remember the exact year, but it's called the 10 Kingdom Plan. And the 10 Kingdom Plan involves the European Union, which they accomplished. So that was one step, merge all of these European countries under one government. And then to do the same thing with the United States, Canada, and Greenland. And that was one of the things, after I decided not to vote for Trump, then I see him basically starting to suggest, hey, we should make Canada the 51st state. Hey, we should annex Greenland. And I was like, that's literally the plan. I mean, this North American Union that they want to create. And then you see all these MAGA people going along with it. Yeah, we should annex Canada. We should annex Greenland. And shockingly, I saw Alex Jones tweet, yeah 1776 worldwide. I was like, dude, I actually put this, I replied to his post because I said, I'm sorry, didn't you make a documentary called Endgame, which warned us of the dangers of the North American Union, which was a merger of the United States and Canada and Greenland, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he's been preaching for decades.
Yeah. So that's one vector. You know, you see Trump pushing for the North American Union, and nobody, if it had been Biden, you know, Alex Jones would be out there. This is the North American Union. Look what Biden's trying to do. But
Yeah.
because it's Trump, people are going along with it. And then what did Trump do? It only, I posted, I think it only took, 48 hours for my theory about Trump being part of the globalist New World Order to be proven correct, because he brought out on day 2, he brought out Sam Altman and Larry Ellison.
Yeah.
Announced this Project Stargate.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, so they're going to put $500 billion into this AI infrastructure system that's going to, among other things, I mean, it's going to be totalitarian surveillance. Watch any Larry Ellison speech at any globalist event. He talks about this. Like, they will be under your skin. They will be in your head. They will know everything that's going on. And this is the guy that Trump brings to the White House to announce this project. And on top of that, they're going to use it to make cancer vaccines that will actually edit the human genome. So there's your transhumanist agenda. And then you have Trump pushing all these cryptocurrencies, which, that's part of the agenda to make a cashless society, because they need to have totalitarian control and establish this one world government. They need to have under the skin surveillance. So they will put a, chip in your brain. Here, see Trump.
And that's, one of Elon's companies. That's Neuralink. And now all of a sudden that brings Elon into the mix.
Yes. Yeah. I should have mentioned that earlier, because that was actually a big thing that woke me up. Because
this is wild, man.
All of the technologies that Elon Musk is pushing, and I don't say he developed them, because I personally think that it was
he definitely did it.
Yeah, I think
dude, I'll tell you what, man, the curtain's being lifted on that dude. Actually, Candace Owens the other day said the most brilliant thing in her podcast with Ian Carroll, where she's like, I don't understand how Elon runs 3 companies, 4 companies, runs Doge, does this, does all this. And the dude's on Twitter all day long. Who's doing the actual other work? That curtain needs to get lifted on that.
I struggle to tweet 2 or 3 times a day, and I don't run 6 companies or however many it is,
It's unbelievable. I mean, social media is such a time suck that if you try to spend time on it, it will suck up your entire day. I'm not even on Twitter, but between Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, it sucks up so much time. And when she said that, I went to Elon's Twitter profile. I was like, oh my God. Like, this was in a stretch of 9 hours. He had tweeted 300 times. I'm like, this is insane.
That's crazy. I didn't even know it was that much. But yeah, he, the whole thing about how he was the #1 video game player in this highly complex video game that it takes thousands of hours to get good at, and then it turned out that whole thing was fake. I mean, it's just so much. So that was another clue, because I saw this lifelong leftist Democrat, just like Trump, by the way, billionaire. And all of a sudden, he changes teams right before the election. And
that was weird, too.
And you have to think about people like Alex Jones, people that study this stuff are watching Elon Musk, and they're all like lots of people thought Elon Musk was the Antichrist. I mean, he's developing all these technologies that are going to be used to control us and enslave us. This satellite surveillance system, the brain chip.
Yep.
All the things, and the self-driving cars, that's a big part of the control agenda, and just the whole data. We're told, Elon Musk bought X for free speech purposes. It's like X is the biggest data collection system in the world, and so I saw that and I said, oh wow, okay, so they've rebranded Elon Musk as a conservative, as part of this patriot movement, and now you have Alex Jones running out there saying, oh, he's done a 180. He's team humanity now, And I was like, give me a break, man. So where all this is going is that Trump is a puppet to make it so that, he went through all this lawfare, all the Russiagate thing, the assassination attempt, and just all of it, to victimize him to such an extent that it creates this hero worship cult that people are just like, he's made it through all this stuff and he's still going because he's fighting for America, because he's fighting for our freedom. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's laughable. Like, you watch these Democrats just fulminate for 4 years about how he's the second coming of Hitler and he needs to be in prison and he's a literal felon and all this stuff. Then the minute he wins the election, everybody's like, yeah, you know, we'll have a peaceful transition of power. That's the first thing you heard.
Totally. That's another great point. That's another great point in terms of how much the Democrats demonized him. And now it's just like, they're not really saying that much. I mean, I think they're going more after people in his cabinet and, you know, the crisis de jour that happens on a daily basis versus necessarily being as vitriol and visceral in terms of going after him. All right, listen, Paul, this is turning into the Cory Booker 25-hour filibuster version of a podcast because you're so damn interesting and I absolutely love this. But listen, let's do this. Let's kind of put a wrap on today. I think we covered so many things. More importantly, again, I totally appreciate how open and honest you were, and I hope people got a real understanding of gosh, the transformation that you've really done with yourself and with your thinking and with your mindset. And to me, if there's anything that gives somebody credibility, it's somebody that can change their position and their thinking based on the fact sets that are available. So I tremendously applaud you for that. I will absolutely, let's get something scheduled soon for this New World Order stuff. I think this is super legit and super important to talk about, and something I really haven't discussed on the podcast. And I'd love for you to sort of, you know, usher us down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could have remained more focused, but there's just it's
No,
such a
I know,
broad
dude.
topic, you know?
Me both, man. You and me both. I feel like this was our version of Ian Carroll and Joe Rogan, where we just had so many things to talk about.
Yeah.
We kind of scattered a little bit, but anyway,
But I agree with your conclusion that I think there will be a false flag that will lead us into World War III, and that will bring about the New World Order, and that all these technologies are then going to be used to enslave us. They're just trying to tear down our current system, I think, and then that will bring in the one world government. Just to sum it all up.
All right, buddy, stay on the line. All right, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Man, you're probably going to have to listen to this one twice, but we're going to have Paul back on to go through some other things that are going to absolutely blow your mind. So call a spade and stay on the line, Paul, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, thanks, Ray.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.